welcome to another Mobile Monday event for this month of August. Tonight we will be talking about the challenges for innovating on mobile devices and also wearables. We have a good crowd. We have the Ubuntu in the house. We have BlackBerry, TTB, iBasis, Telefonica digital. So it's a good lineup. And it'll be a good discussion on how to innovate the innovation process, definitely when it comes down to devices and wearables. So a couple of intros. My name is Tapia. I'm director, president, head honcho of Mobile Monday here in Silicon Valley. And I think we also have a couple of other folks. We have John here on the camera, who's also one of the organizers here. We also have Artie is also in the back, and we have also some people from Mobile Monday, St. Petersburg in Russia, kind of helping out tonight. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides and show you a little bit about, okay, who's the first time tonight? First time at a Mobile Monday. Wow. Okay. Okay, who's in wearables? Who's working in wearables tonight? Wow. How about mobile devices, the hardware stuff? Software and hardware, software. Okay. Wow. Who builds apps? Who's building apps here? I see. Okay. Cool. All right. It's a good audience. Okay. Who are designers? Who are the UX people? Wow. We got a lot of designers here. Okay. Engineers. Okay. VCs. Any VCs? Yeah, you guys are So very cool. So I'm going to go through some slides and just show you a little bit about what mobile innovate is. So the agenda for tonight, I'm just going to welcome. We'll have a little keynote from Ubuntu, and Jono's going to show you a really cool device. And it's kind of like one of the devices that you'll find in a bar one night. I got Jono doing drinks tonight. But we'll also have a discussion. Victor Brilon will be the moderator, and then we'll go back to some networking. So what Mobile Monday is, we're a grassroots nonprofit. We're based in Austin, Dallas, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, Boston, Denver. This is just like the key major cities of the U.S. But we're also some smaller cities like Miami, Detroit, etc., Lansing. But it's a pretty big organization. We're over 140 different cities around the world. And just Silicon Valley alone, this is what our demographic is. Actually, this is kind of, whoa, I didn't update this one. So we're about a third business development. Okay, who's business development? Sales. Okay, yeah, about a third. Developers, good, about a third. And then product marketing people. Okay, media, anybody from media? Bloggers, okay, yeah, bloggers, cool. And then designers, UX, yeah, I got it. So last year, when I put this together, we were at 5,000 plus memberships. Today we're over 11,000 at last month's count. So we are growing very quickly. But we still get about 400 people. Yeah, we're about 300-ish tonight. So not too bad. So this is what we do. We do monthly topic meetups, which is where you are at tonight. We do labs. So next Monday, we have labs on HTML5 development at AT&T's Innovation Center in Palo Alto. Check out meetup.com for more information, but we have that event going on. And it's really developer focused, so it's going to be about 50 folks, and you're going to go to a deep dive into a lot of tools for HTML5. But that's what basically labs are focused for. It's going to be a small group, but you get to a little geeky and throw some code up on the wall. And then we also do our CXO dinners. This is, you have to be really a founder or an executive in a large startup, in a large company, and we basically get 25, 30 people together for topic discussions. Here's some of our sponsors, so definitely a lot of big companies involved with Mobile Monday. We also have an Accelerator program that I want to talk to you tonight about. And our very first class just graduated a couple of weeks ago, and in that last class we had 5Run Squirrel actually exited. So 5Run raised $650K, Orbeus raised about $1.5 million. Local Myers actually have some big deals in the pipeline. Pocket Math actually is profitable. So So they really weren't searching for funding, but they had a lot of great contacts to grow their business. And we are open for applications right now. So until early September, we'll have applicants from all around the world. So we're basically soliciting every major Mobile Monday city around the world to also bring them to Silicon Valley and accelerate them. And I think our first class, having raised close to over $2.5 million, having one sell, kind of proves this point. We bring in about 50 mentors who's been there, done that in the Valley to help grow your company. And guess what? It's cost you zero equity. So thanks to Samsung, Intuit, PayPal, Wilson CD, they actually flip a bill to actually run the program for the startups. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides to talk more about that. And this is our team. So we're big and we're getting a little bigger, but definitely we have a good sized team, and we cover basically we separate all the different responsibilities. So within the team we have a team for meetups, we have a team for dinners, we have a team for the labs, and also we have a team focused on social media and communication stuff. So this is how to find us. Go to www.mobilemonday.us, and that actually will redirect you to meetup.com, and that basically has the calendar events. If you're tweeting tonight, we're at Momo SB, and if you happen to miss, or you want to see the last 3 years of Mobile Mondays, go to Ustream, and every event the last couple of years has been recorded. So I'm going to go into another presentation to show you a little bit about momentum. So basically, you're really looking at the Momentum program, and it's a 12-week program, weekly workshops with mentorship and demo day. The team consists of me, myself, and I, Greg Grossel as well, and also Ryan Bloomer, Mike Chen, and Mike Rao. This is what you guys get. You have almost a dozen classes and on the engagement side to help you grow your benefit, grow your startup. Definitely, we help you find funding, get you access to the brand, get you global exposure. We're located in downtown San Francisco, and basically there's over 700 startups as our neighbors. Momentum headquarters is based within Rocket Space, and they have a high success rate of startups coming out of Rocket Space, so you can get to join that ecosystem. And at a basically, so minimum requirements. So you need 2 people in the startup. You need to be shipping a live product. So I don't want to see PowerPoint, vaporware, PowerPoint engineering. No, you need to have a working product. And also have angel funding. So someone must have been foolish enough to invest in you at the start. But basically, these are our vetting and filters, because we're not going to give you money to come into the program. You will find your money. It's just that you need some money, at least some angel funding, to get you going, and also kind of guarantee that you're going to be staying in the program, right? Or dedicating yourself to your project. Or maybe you are a participant or a graduate of the startup program. So you're a YC graduate, you're a 500 graduate. You're of any type of program that accelerates you, and you graduate, that also qualifies you. Or let's say you've been there, done that. Hey, Mario, I exited my last company, I'm seeding my next startup, using the funds from the last startup, and I would like to apply. Yes, that does qualify you. And also your pre-Series A. Because once you get into A round, you get a board and investors kind of give you more direction. So your pre-Series A. So it's not the basic essentials of a startup program. This is not for kids. This is actually for people that actually have a business that's running. You have this awesome team. You have an awesome product, but you're just missing that next big deal. You need that next introduction to a big company to help secure some of your revenue or solidify your position in the space. And I think with the last class that we had, I think definitely proves this model that there's a gap. There's a huge gap in the industry. Tons of people will give you seed money. Great. That's spray and pray. When you come into our program, we will help you at least get the momentum that you need to grow the company. And I think there's a lot of mentors, I think, also here in the audience that can attest what they bring to the table. So when you also apply, we also look for the quality of the team. You basically how you guys interact. We also look at the product and look at the viability. We also look to see if you have traction. So traction could be in a couple of ways. Maybe if you're an app, it means, hey, I have 10 million monthly active users. Great. I have 5,000 developers signed up to my API SDK program. I have, these are basically you have some. You're not just starting out. Basically, you have some market validation, and also we look to see how you fit. So definitely, where to apply? You go to momentum.mobilemonday.us, and then that will help you essentially find your application. So partners and sponsors. These are the guys that are helping support this on a monetary wise. It's to run the program. Angel and mentors, we have some of the best in the valley that actually are coming and meeting one-on-one with you. I think not many programs can give you this access, specifically VCs that are focused on mobile. This is just a few of the brands that we have engaged with us, but we have over 50 mentors in the program. Last year, this is kind of for the last semester, this is kind of like the rollout. About half the applicants come from the US. And then here's kind of a list of different startups that we had involved. Almost every week, one of the companies was in press. So we got them into TechCrunch, we got them into conferences, we got them into Mashable, we got them basically a lot of visibility over the class period. So I hope everyone, if you do have a startup and you're well on your way, I hope you guys consider it, or tell a friend about it. We are taking applications until September 3rd. And also I wanted to see Jono. Jono, are you around? Great. Cool. So next on the agenda for tonight is Jono from Ubuntu is going to show you a really cool device, and also is going to talk a little bit about a program that Ubuntu is doing.
Okay. How's everyone doing? Really? There's pizza and beer and that's the reaction? How's everyone doing? Okay. So, hi everyone, my name is Jono and I work at Canonical as the Ubuntu Community Manager. It's my first time at Mobile Monday, and I'm glad it's in my own backyard. I live out in the East Bay. I'm just going to talk through some of the work we've been doing with Ubuntu before we get onto the panel. I'm going to try and keep this as quick as possible. So first of all, who am I? I work at Canonical, as I say, as the Ubuntu Community Manager. I have a team of 5 people who work on all aspects of the Ubuntu community. And we're working on client devices, phones, tablets, TVs, desktops, as well as focusing on cloud orchestration as well. I also, on the side, do community management consulting. I'm really interested in the art and science of how we build collaborative communities, both internal and external to organizations. So I wrote a book called The Art of Community, which is published by O'Reilly, and I run the annual Community Leadership Summit, which is a place where community managers and leaders go every year to hobnob and share each other's knowledge. So, we're focused on this. How many of you are familiar with Ubuntu? Excellent. Fresh meat. So we started out years ago. I've been there for about 7 years now. We started out originally just focusing on desktops and servers. And we've since started to focus on a fully converged strategy. And this works on 3 different levels. First of all, we're building a platform that is convergent across all these devices. So that means we have a central code base that we will deploy on a TV, a desktop, a tablet, and a mobile as well. So when we fix a bug or add a feature in our code base, it maps across all of those different devices. The second element is the user experience. We're building a UI that feels like Ubuntu on each of these different devices, but is customized for that particular screen size as well. And then the third area is application development. We want to build an application platform where you write an app once, and it will be reactive to those different form factors as well. So you can target all of these different devices with your single code base. So just to give you an idea, I mean, we're obviously Mobile Monday. Most of the people here care about phones. So I'm just going to show you a 1-minute video that provides an overview of the Ubuntu phone. So when we started out with this, we started looking at the evolution of the phone. Many of you will remember the old phones, and I don't know why our design team thinks 1999 is old. But back in those days we had hardware keyboards, and then phones progressed forward to focusing on on-screen keyboards, but there was still a lot of Chrome available in the phone itself, lots of buttons and scroll bars and everything else. One of the things that we discovered in our user testing and assessing current platforms is people want to focus on content. So the Ubuntu phone is all about getting all of that Chrome out of the way so you can focus on content, but also being able to be contextually responsive to the situation that you're in. So instead of showing lots of buttons and scroll bars, we show the buttons and scroll bars that are relevant to the situation you're in. I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing is we noticed, OEMs, they want to reduce their bill of materials. The fewer buttons on the phone means there's going to be fewer support issues, it's going to be a cheaper phone. The Ubuntu phone only requires one button, the power switch. And we can do everything else using the edges of the phone. So when we started looking at how to build a phone, we explored all kinds of different patterns in nature. We looked at origami, we looked at shapes and visuals in nature. We looked at different aspects of tessellation and how patterns fit together. Because we wanted to build something that wasn't just the same functionally as Android. We wanted to build something that was as beautiful as an iPhone, but more open than Android. And that was our goal. So we started looking at all these different things, and we started applying that to a set of design patterns. But we're not building just a phone. This is all about convergence. So each of these different designs, patterns that we've built, are applicable across all of those different form factors as well to build this kind of unified experience. So just to give you an example of how it works, when you switch the phone on, when you switch the screen on, we've got a bunch of demos. We've got 2 phones here that are fully working that you can check out. My colleague Alex, who's going to embarrass himself right now, there he is, that guy in the back in the horrendous pink stripy shirt. He's got a phone with him, so if you want to go and check one out, I've got one with me as well if you want to see it working. But when you switch it on, you see this thing called an infographic. We found that most people, if you're hanging out in a bar, you switch your phone on every 10 minutes to see if there's messages and whatever else. This can show you how many steps that you've walked if you're using a Fitbit as an example, text messages, direct messages, things like that. So it's personal to you right out of the gate. But then what we did was we optimized each of the edges of the screen. So for example, on each of our different devices, if you slide out from the left, you get what's called the launcher. This is your most frequently used applications. From the right-hand side, you can multitask through your apps. One of the things that we found from our user testing was with Android, there's a lot of variance in how you switch between different apps. It's confusing on an iPhone. With an Ubuntu phone, you just slide from the right edge of the screen. It's as simple as that. So each of these different edges do something specific. One of the other things that many of you will hate is fragmentation. We don't want to get into the business of fragmentation, so we explored ways in which we could have OEMs customize the phone, but maintain the core of the Ubuntu phone as it is. So there's 2 primary layers in which OEMs can do this. This is one thing we get all the time, questions all the time about the Ubuntu phone, is how do you stop becoming as fragmented as other platforms? So with the Ubuntu phone, you can customize the look and the feel of it and the theme and those kinds of things. But fundamentally, the structure of the phone remains the same. What we found from talking to most carriers is that carriers are increasingly becoming content companies. If they're not delivering content themselves, they're partnering with content companies such as Netflix and Comcast. So the other area in which we provide an area of differentiation is what we call scopes. So when you open up an Ubuntu phone, you can flip between these different screens, apps, home, music, people, videos. These are different views on content that can pull content from the internet, content that's local on your phone. And this is a place where carriers can push content to you. This has become a really valuable feature on the Ubuntu desktop as well as on the Ubuntu phone. So this is a great way in which the core operating functionality of the phone will remain the same, but then we can differentiate with carriers. So speaking of carriers, we set up something called the Carrier Advisory Group. One of the pieces of feedback that we'd heard was that with some of the platforms, it's really difficult to influence. It's difficult to change it and to get patches in and things such as that. So the Ubuntu community has been around for many years. We have a long history of working with OEMs and carriers and hardware companies and developers and everything else. So we set up the Carrier Advisory Group to put together a forum in which carriers can say, these are the kind of challenges that we face, so they can actually influence the development of Ubuntu as well. We've got carriers from pretty much most major markets now. We've got a couple of the major carriers in the US, still working on the Ubuntu. So, the other key thing as well that we found was from an application development. I know some people with their hands up as developers. From an app dev perspective, we don't want to force someone to write apps in one particular platform. So we built an SDK where you can write native apps using QML. We also want people to be able to deliver HTML5 apps as well. Our HTML5 apps integrate neatly into the platform, so there's APIs for all the system functions as well. It shares the look and the feel of the Ubuntu phone as well. So it doesn't feel like a web app that's trapped in a tab. Now, just before I finish up, I just want to talk quickly about the community. Our community is at the core of what we do in Ubuntu. Well, the day that we announced the Ubuntu phone, we also asked our community if they wanted to participate and get involved in building out big chunks of the phone. We had 1,500 developers sign up within the first week who were interested in helping out. They've built the 12 core apps we've got on the phone. They've been working on that as well. And then we've also had a partnership with XDA. Our view is you should be able to run Ubuntu Touch on any handset. We were speaking at the XDA conference this last weekend in Miami, and it's already been ported to 45 different handsets as well. And then just before I wrap up, some of you may be familiar with the Ubuntu Edge campaign. It looks like that. It also looks like this, if anyone wants to come and check it out. We're trying to raise $32 million as part of a crowdfunding campaign. We've beat 2 out of the 3 records. It's a pretty beefy spec phone. It's $695. I'm not going to be an ad though, so you can go and check it out at this website. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to my good friend here.
So where do I go to pledge my money for? Awesome. How much? What's the minimum? $6.95 and the minimum I can put in $10. That's why I support the project.
You can put like $20 in.
Cool. Awesome. Exactly. Very cool. All right. And by the way, everyone in the room is going to get one for $6.99. All right. So next, we're going to start the panel. Victor's here. Cool. So Victor Brilon has an awesome background in product management of many devices. So who's heard of the N800? What was the other one? You did an N900? That N900? Yeah. Okay.
All 3 of them.
All right. So I think for all 3 people that bought the phone, so Victor has an awesome background in mobility and also device management. So we have an interesting discussion tonight because you guys, most people don't know the ins and outs of actually building robust devices that have an RTOS. Who knows what an RTOS is? Hey, you have device people get in the room. Okay, cool. That means a real-time operating system. It has to do with all the hardware that goes for that stuff. And making sure that it's not that buggy. Sometimes they are. So, without further ado, are you guys?
Round of applause to Mario and the Mobile Monday team for Evangelist. We got pizza, we got dinner, we got people.
I guess have them sit down and then introduce
Okay, so
yourself.
come down, Juana. Let's navigate ourselves on stage here. All right. So we have a really interesting discussion tonight to talk about development and innovation. Oh, you remember John? Sorry. No, I'm sorry. We didn't see you. Go ahead. John, what you got that? Yeah, there you go. We'll get, you kind of be able to count 5. There you go. Here's what John, you sit there. Okay. Now that we've got all of our panelists on stage. So, the topic tonight is talking about development of mobile devices and wearable devices and innovations in those fields. So we have a great, really interesting panel tonight. We'll start down there. We have Larry, who's with BlackBerry. We have Jono, who's with representation with Canonical. We have Simon with Telefonica. We have Ethan, who's with Basis Science. And we have Jono with ZTE. So we have representatives from, I think, a really nice broad spectrum of device manufacturers, OEMs, and operators. So it's an interesting topic. So we have a couple of questions I'd like to get these guys to answer, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. So please save your questions for the end. We'll have lots of time for that. So to kick off the conversation on the topic of development and innovation, I want to start off with the guys with device manufacturers, specifically ZTE and BlackBerry, because you guys are kind of the established players in this space. But I want to hear everybody's thoughts on it. You know, the current mental model in the software development space is that the speed at which software gets developed is speeding up constantly. And that's through the use of better tools, better methodologies, better established tools. It's getting there. So how do you, as a device manufacturer that's already established, it has to support both hardware and software, how do you iterate rapidly enough on the hardware side to keep up with the incredible fast pace of change with the software, and more importantly, with the feedback that you're getting from the marketplace? So, or Larry, start with.
Am I on? There we go. So, as a guy from BlackBerry, this is a really easy question because the way we do this is in the middle of the most heated, cell phone war. We stop everything we're doing and create and start a whole new platform. That's what we do. I don't necessarily recommend that to other people. It's quite a lot of work to do, but it's a great question, and it's actually the reason we had to adopt a whole new OS, because the BlackBerry OS, as we call it, the Java-based OS we had, just couldn't scale. So what we did is we adopted a required QNX as our RTOS, or where is Mario? So I know what an RTOS is. So we have QNX, we acquired QNX, and we took their RTOS and embedded that into our device, and we started building products from them zero. And it's just still at the early stages, as many of you guys know.
So for ZTE, we primarily develop Android smartphones. Probably may or may not have heard of us, but we're actually the 4th largest Android, smartphone OEM in the world. 50% of our phones approximately are sold in China, so and outside of China, mostly operator branded. But in terms of innovation and time to market, this past February Mobile World Congress, we launched the first Firefox OS smartphone, HTML5-based smartphone, and we really relied on our partners, Qualcomm, Mozilla, and Telefonica, the first launch partners. So from there, different elements brought in parts of that innovation, I guess, like the speed to a task. Qualcomm certainly wants to sell their chipsets to as many operating systems as possible, whatever the market will support. Telefonica and operators in general want a diversity of platforms, not necessarily beholden to the duopoly of iOS and Android. And certainly for ZTE, we're very operating privileged. We wanted to do whatever the operator would like to customize. So from that standpoint, there are a variety of players in the ecosystem that want to help accelerate innovation in one case.
So I want to ask something like that. So for folks who are not in the hardware business, it's probably a good baseline to establish that even the most fastest moving company that's doing hardware, from the time they concept until the device is in detail, it's device is at best a year, right? That includes design, manufacturing, testing, certification, all that stuff. So everybody wants to begin about innovation. But the reality is what we're seeing in the marketplace, Apple launches a new device, and in that rush, copy that device and get it out there. So how do you innovate as a device manufacturer while still reacting to the marketplace where things like the iPhone are incredibly successful?
Yeah, I think I started to allude to it, I didn't really get to it. With the adoption of QNX, since it's an RTOS, since it's been around for about 25 years, and it's in so many different kinds of things, what we decided to do as a company was not just focus on phones necessarily, right? QNX is embedded in lottery machines, Cisco routers, nuclear power plants. 70% of the automobiles on the road today are running QNX. When people are familiar with General Motors, OnStar, where QNX is there, and there for 10 years, there's power in that. So, and we're in Audi and all kinds of vehicles. So, kind of what we did is we took maybe a step back, or you can argue a couple steps back, and started building a platform that we could really innovate on beyond just phones, and that's kind of what we've been calling mobile computing anyway so far. And there's still a lot to be said with that story. It's not fully communicated, I think, anywhere in any handset manufacturer yet. But for us, what we're doing is adopting an operating system that empowers people to think beyond the device and communicate with lots of different things around it. And QNX, RTOS is a fantastic, very lightweight, extremely high performance device, and then building a rich algorithm system around it to allow developers to build whatever they want. So we have the most compliant HTML5 runtime out there, a WebKit runtime. We have, POSIX compliant C++ capability with a really nice UI toolkit. We've got Air, so if you're an Air developer. We also have an Android runtime, which I launched before I moved to the Angels, the last product I launched with our Android.
Especially on that though, I do have a separate question about operating systems. I would like to come back to that point. Let's come back to that. But to move along, I have a question. Maybe the basis and Canonical guys could answer. Or everyone's feedback towards you. So you guys are relatively new in the space, right? Both in the wearable space and in the mobile device space. And you're entering a market that has a lot of barriers built into it, both for competitive and regulatory reasons. And those markets are not optimized for efficiency, to say the least. So if you look at the telephone market, for example, right? The operators are still driving a lot of features, pricing. Right? You have regulatory issues around and legal issues around what the open source, right? So there's a lot of barriers there. So how do you guys go rapidly in an environment where your cards really are stacked against newcomers and they're stacked against smaller companies?
That's a good question. I think in terms of barriers, regulatory environments are not necessarily the biggest friction points for somebody like my basis. I think in the health and fitness wearable space, the FDA and getting sort of medical device grade approval is maybe one of the biggest hurdles, if that's the market that you would want to go towards. I think the current wearable space is decided to play in a more popular kind of mass market area where we're going to have we're going to be addressing like sort of more general fitness applications than going straight into, say, a very specific medical monitoring market. So we would look to do entry into medical monitoring once we establish a foothold in a more general market. But I think that the primary barriers around innovation, at least at this stage, particularly in the wearables market, are less about regulatory, although there's certainly device certification issues if you want to expand internationally. But more about just trying to understand the space itself. I think that there's enough competition right now, there's enough innovation in terms of form factor, different types of wearable devices. There's trying to guess where the third-party software ecosystem is going to go, what sorts of APIs offer. All of these sorts of pieces are very much in play right now. And I think that trying to understand how to position oneself and how to innovate against those are probably the bigger questions to ask oneself. And then also for a company of a startup scale, just being able to deal with custom manufacturing. is a huge, huge challenge just in and of itself. That's probably the primary, like, first order bid you really want to try and tackle.
I think it's a great question as well. My perspective here, and I think our perspective with Ubuntu is there are multiple layers to this problem. So one is barriers to innovation. Our view is that basically developers are what's driving the world. When developers are blocked and they can write awesome applications and write awesome code, then that's how things move forward. The barriers tend to come into the internal politics of organizations and how fast they can move and how all the different pieces of their chain are connected. And we've seen over the last 10 years a huge amount of disruption with Linux. Linux completely changed the technology industry because it provided a platform in which people could deliver real value with a more limited level of cost. So when people started investing in the Linux kernel, it meant that companies were open to compete when they couldn't compete beforehand. And my view is that we're seeing something very similar in the mobile world in the sense of there isn't a huge amount of choice in terms of platforms for OEMs and carriers to deliver. And there is a huge opportunity to create a more collaborative model around those platforms. So what Linux opened up was people could collaborate, they could work together with their competitors to deliver value. And I think there's an opportunity, that's what we're trying to present with Ubuntu, is that this is an environment where you can actually work with other people who work with other organizations. I'd say the second area here as well is differentiation. Everybody's terrified of fragmentation. Obviously Apple's not in this game. This is very much of an Android world to a reasonable extent. And people want to be able to differentiate while not tying themselves to support knots. When, my wife had an Android phone and I had an Android phone, were completely different experiences. So to me, the real innovation is happen. How can these carriers differentiate from each other while maintaining a consistent platform? And that was one of the key problems that we set out to solve as well. But to me, like it's still a transitionary period. And I think we'll get there, but we need to enable great developers and we need to confront the issues head on.
That's great. We'll go back to that because one of the things I want to ask you about, you mentioned collaboration areas several times with the operators. We've seen in the past areas where OEMs and operators will try to collaborate together. They haven't made huge successes in that area for a variety of reasons. So I'll get back to that. But since we have an operator in the room on stage, so as Telefonica, you're one of the largest operators in the world. How do you define innovation? How do you innovate under the weight of your established business? Now we all know Telefonica itself is made up of lots of political groups focusing on lots of different things, but in the outside world you're one company. So given this weight that you have to carry your existing business, how do you innovate and how do you do that without alienating your existing business and your existing partners and your existing customers?
So, good questions, Ron. So those of you that know Telefonica, as Victor mentioned, we are one of the world's largest carriers. We have 300 million subscribers in LATAM, UK, Germany, and parts of Europe. So you may know O2 in UK and Germany, or Movistar in Spain. So I think, to answer your question, Victor, I think one of the bold steps Telefonica took was to create a whole new digital entity. So Telefonica Digital is focused on having monetized the infrastructure and a lot of its legacy equipment that sits in the network today. So Telefonica, we don't just sell devices. Telefonica Digital is now looking at initiatives such as big data. How do you monetize the breadth and depth of information that Telefonica has around subscribers? How do you, for example, help Best Buy identify whether they should build a store on Townsend Street or on Market Street because of footfall of traffic at a certain time of day with a certain demographic or subscriber? Issues like end-to-end, Firefox OS, and other initiatives that Telefonica Digital is driving are really reshaping the way carriers and operators act around the world. And I think Telefonica is taking a bold step to create a digital entity focused on monetizing digital. We still clearly sell and need to sell millions of devices. But I think creating a dedicated team focused on digital, taking risks. I think Telefonica Digital is a big risk for us. It was actually one of our senior members of our UK entity that became the CEO of Digital, and he admits it's a big risk, starting this new entity, investing a huge amount of resources into digitising the data and information that we have and growing digital services. So I think it requires dedication and focus and risk taking. And with Firefox OS, again, we are the first carrier, or were the first carrier to launch Firefox OS devices. We launched in Spain, Venezuela and Colombia, and other parts of LATAM and Brazil will launch later this year. Again, in Spain, having an €89 device is a risk for us, given our demographic in that market. But it's a risk that we're taking, and it's paying off. In LATAM, the penetration of smartphones is still 25, 26%. And again, we're showing leadership by launching Firefox devices, being the first carrier, launching a device at a price point that we think is going to work for its demographic.
So, Simon, to your point, Telefonica still controls huge parts of the market in certain parts of the world. And not just Telefonica, obviously, but in most parts of the world, the network operator is still a distribution point for how a phone gets to a consumer, for better or worse. And telco operators traditionally have not been shy about using that power in order to be able to dictate what phones do, what features they have and don't have, what prices they have, and so forth. Now, I think we've seen Apple as maybe the first one that actually kind of broken through in that a little bit. Not 100% maybe, but certainly early progress people have gotten. But it'd be interesting to hear from the device people on stage. How do you view that world with the operators being so dominant, yet have necessity being large and slow moving? How do you find that middle ground as a device manufacturer?
Sure. So I would agree that the operators today still do have a disproportionate amount of influence, but certainly for CTP, I think one of the strategies that we've been trying to do in terms of innovation and building our brand recognition is to try and go through more market-open devices. So not locked to a carrier. And you're starting to see Google pushing this a little bit, and they're not necessarily with their Google Nexus devices and their Google Play Edition devices for the HTC One and Samsung Galaxy 4. And so coincidentally, today CTP announced that we're going to be releasing our Fox OS phone in the US and the UK via eBay for $99. So sometime later this year, you'll be able to buy a $99 Firefox OS phone. So for CTE's standpoint, we might not sell a lot of volume, but it's a way to test these new products in the marketplace to see what is appealing to the operator, to the individuals, and then having that feedback feed into the operators. And so that's one way that we'll be able to test out innovation and not necessarily put out devices that are for the operation that can be a little bit more risk-taking and trial
You guys are building your first phone. What are your conversations with that? Obviously, we're confidential data. What are your conversations with operators looking like? What are operators saying about building an open source phone?
So the conversations that we've had so far have been very positive. I think most of the operators were surprised when we entered the market. As Ubuntu has a long heritage on the desktop, particularly on the cloud as well. But one of the things that most of the operators identified was the challenges that face the market right now in terms of fragmentation, in terms of the cost of shipping as well, in terms of the hardware requirements around shipping, and the distribution channels. So the responses that we had when we did this blitz, this huge tour, and went around talking to each of the different carrier operators to explore whether they would be interested in Ubuntu. And there was a resounding yes. It was a resounding, this is something we're definitely interested in. We want to explore it further, because obviously it's a big investment. these guys will no doubt testify, it was a big investment to focus on a new product. We tried to, one of the core goals that we set out to do was not to build, not to lock ourselves in a hut and presume what the challenges of the market were. We've always tried to be responsive to the reality of the world that surrounds us. And that's one of the reasons why we set up the Carrier Advisory Group, because we felt like we had a good idea of the challenges that companies are facing in terms of monetization, in terms of billing, payments, around content, things such as that. But ever since we set up the Carrier Advisory Group, it's helped to enrich our experience of what we need to focus on. And that's resulted in a really fast turnaround, because Canonical has become, we're about 570 people right now. So we're big, but we're still small enough to be nimble. So we can modify our strategy, focus on new areas, as and when the demand comes in. Now we've got most of the major carriers signed up. It provides us with a pretty accurate representation across the board of the problems that we need to solve.
What you're going to do here, you've kind of seen both sides of it actually. What was a tremendously dominant player in the marketplace and now trying to regrow that market share. Where do you see your interest in the operators, and where do you see that wave of innovation and growth being either helped or hindered by the operators?
Yeah, I think this is a brilliant question, and I wish I could answer it better than I'm going to answer it. But spoiler alert. The thing is, BlackBerry has always been very, very close to carriers, right? It's been written about 1 million times. We enter our carrier relationships as a partnership, not a dictator, right? And I think the carriers worldwide are all very open to new possibilities, right? Whether you're looking at Windows and BlackBerry and whatever else is out there, Firefox OS. And the reason is they don't want there just to be 2 players, right? And I think all carriers are saying that. You get down to a duopoly or a monopoly, and it's just not good for anybody. So we work very, very closely with the carriers, as you might imagine, on lots of innovative products together. They don't always come to fruition, but like one of the previous panelists said, we don't presume to know what the customers or consumers are going to want either a few years out. Although we have some ideas about how we're innovating across multiple devices, like I told you, and carriers are, of course, very interested in how they can play into that space. So we're exploring a lot of those types of opportunities.
Great. So let's jump to the topic of operating systems. I think everyone in this stage has an agenda around an operating system. So if I ask you guys what you guys want with, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. So let's ask that question a little differently. Clearly there's 2 dominant operating systems in the market space. Clearly we think there's a need for at least one more. Clearly yours is the organizational question, yours is the best. How do you go about building a true community around that operating system? You've seen that being a vital necessity of organic growth, to build that community. How do you define what the ecosystem looks like, and how do you grow it? And you know, you don't have an operating system, but you guys are still working in the same space of building a community and building an ecosystem eventually around what you're doing. So I'd love to hear from your side, how do you guys do it? Let's let you guys take over.
Sure. Well, let me preface my answer by first saying it's a great question. Let's see. Well, so community is like a really big term too, right? So there's a lot of different kinds of things. I'm assuming you mean development.
What does the community mean to you? For some people it means a consumer community, some means a developer community. So from your perspective as a basis, what's the community?
Well, so first and foremost, we are a consumer-facing device. So consumer community is our primary goal. And without tipping our hat too much, we are certainly eyeballing what is a nascent and growing developer community around our devices. So a number of other players in the market have already opened up SDKs. Needless to say, wearable computing, in order for it to really, be fruitful, it has to work in concert with other devices. It's sort of like the next harbinger of ambient intelligence and all these really fun things we're working towards. So both communities are really important. So how do you go about developing those? Well, the consumer side is about building a very good consumer experience. It's about being able to understand very clearly what a problem is in the market, what a problem is that you're solving for your users, and being very single-minded about that, and understanding how those users evolve. The wearable market is very new. So we're dealing with an early adopter community. There's a bunch of different people with different interests in that community. You've got sort of quantified selfers, you've got fitness junkies, and as that gets broader and broader adoption, those markets change. So the question is really, what are you solving for there? But you develop a sort of responsiveness around that, and when you find that you're doing a good job of providing a solution, you double down, and hopefully you found a very broad-reaching solution. In terms of developer communities, there's a number of different types of developers as well. There's software development, and then there's complementary hardware that can also work. And I think in the wearable space, if you look at standards and protocols, there's like scales that talk to your watch, that talk to your phone. So hardware interoperability and a hardware ecosystem also has to be considered in addition to some of the obvious stuff around just getting software developers that play nice with your device. You as a wearable device are producing very, very interesting contextual data, and everybody wants a piece of that. And in order for that contextual data to be relevant to that user outside of what you can reflect back to them about its usage, it has to start talking to other things. I wish that I was incredibly awesome about building developer communities, and I knew exactly what to do, but really, it's about, again, you begin to provide value back to that ecosystem. You identify what that value is, whether it's specific data that you offer, whether it's you have a good user base, whether you have something that can offset technology cost for other developers, and you make that very well accessible. And just as you treat your consumer audience, you listen very carefully, find when you're successful at it. So
John, ZTE supports several operating systems, Android now, Firefox OS. How do you guys view the world of community and ecosystems? How do you define those? How do you build those? And how do you build those so that they support not only the Android Firefox, but those that support ZTE as a company?
So, we do support both Android and Firefox OS. Firefox OS is, we were the first to come out with a phone for that, and we are championing and working closely with Telefonica to get the first devices out there to be really popular. But we're also relying on, Mozilla to be the lead champion, because they are the ones developing the Firefox OS platform as well as the developer community. But Mozilla has a stake in getting input from other providers, both hardware OEMs such as ZTE, as well as operators, as well as independent software developers. So we bring our perspective to the Mozilla community through our conversations with Mozilla, and certainly our engagement and understanding of what the operator needs and what they're asking. We will feed that back also into Mozilla. So it's really participating and trying to influence the direction of Firefox OS in terms of what the OEM needs, as well as what we're hearing from our end users and such. On the Android standpoint, certainly that's the Google key, right? I mean, in terms of the Android developers, Google, they have the Google I/O and the releases of Android. So I mean, Google's a much bigger platform for much more well-known entity in terms of engaging developers to push the platform forward. But certainly within China, I mean, certainly as ZTE, we are one of two OEMs that I know of that develop an Android-based platform that is not fragmented. I mean, everything goes through Android competitive test suite. So what you develop in the United States will work, if it's certified Android. So from that standpoint, as well as providing a market space. So we have a ZTE App Store, since Google Play is not available in China. So from that standpoint, providing a distribution point as well as certified, pure, non-fragmented Android experience for developers as well as the users in China.
Right, so as the other part of that Firefox relationship, Telefonica is by far the most active operator involved with Firefox. Where do you guys stand on that from a standpoint with community and ecosystem? What does that mean to grow?
Yeah, so maybe just to say two things to go through. So I think, as I mentioned, Telefonica is the first carrier to launch Firefox for its devices. There are 17 other carriers supporting the initiative. This is not a Telefonica, Mozilla initiative. This is 18 carriers. Telefonica is the first carrier to launch devices. So Deutsche Telekom, Telenor, Sprint, American Mobile, and 14 other carriers are behind this initiative. So just to make that clear. And I think, secondly, the reasons Telefonica is doing this is to try and reduce that duopoly of Google and iOS. But this is not an anti-Google or an anti-iOS measure for us. This is about trying to level the playing field, trying to add more choice and flexibility for consumers, and removing those barriers that exist today. So there are multiple control points in terms of the store, in terms of monetization, billing, advertising, merchandising that exist today that can control or constrain developers. And so we believe that HTML5 is a way forward to reduce that duopoly. And I often read our press Q&A, our press team here will probably kill me, but our Q&A, one of the questions is, what does success look like for Telefonica? And success for us isn't selling 10 billion devices. Success is other players in the ecosystem adopting this open nature and open approach.
That's fantastic. So we've got just a few minutes, but you guys, both of you companies, have come into this with huge established communities. And have probably the largest number of touch points that you have with your users of your devices. You probably also have, for BlackBerry, you guys have one of the most religious users about your devices and about your brand. So how do you leverage that with building new devices and rebuilding the brand and rebuilding the devices that you have?
I'll be really quick. So, as I mentioned in my presentation, I run a community here in Canonical. So this is not just a good question, it's an excellent question. I believe that community falls into two broad areas. One is platform and one is developers. And you have to do a great job with each of them. We have a long heritage of building a community around the platform. We have 200,000 active developers every week working on different aspects of the Ubuntu community. But one of the things that's interesting is that in engaging people to participate as part of your ecosystem, they have to feel part of it. If they feel like they are merely the icing on the cake, then you won't build a real community. What you'll build is you build a group of followers, essentially. Our goal with Ubuntu is to build a community that people can actively influence the platform. I believe that we are the only full operating system available for multiple devices that can be actively influenced by any stakeholder, be it a developer, carrier, and anything else. We started out, we built that operating system community. We've been doing that for the last 8 years. We've been focusing heavily on building out the developer community. But in our view, what will build an awesome developer community is a developer platform that developers love to hack on. And the only way in which you can do that is to build it, get feedback from developers, iterate, to review, and to refine it. And that's what we've been really focused on. That's one of the reasons why we didn't want to just say HTML5. We didn't just want to say Qt. We didn't just want to say WPL. We wanted to support these 3 different platforms because different developers like to program in different ways. And they want to deliver to a single consistent platform. And the one thing that all developers hate is convergence. They hate having to write multiple applications for multiple different devices. So that's one of the reasons why we've tried to focus on not only building our community for us, but to be something that more developers can fit into this matter of course.
So it's now time to get controversial. Platform has ever had on the first day of launch. And the way we did that was a number of things. We gave away a shitload of devices. We ran a whole bunch of events where we gave developers money. We fixed all our tooling. So we had a lot of tooling problems before that, so we worked incredible to get our tooling easy to use, source code available, people can just download, we put stuff on GitHub. And we showed people how to make money on the platform. And then the other thing we did, which I think kind of goes to your question about cross-platform, is we supported just about every runtime out there. And when I say can we get controversial, I was going to say, my question was, well, is Android an OS? I don't ever think of it that way. I think of it as a platform. And hopefully people with Google Glass in the front row aren't getting mad at me, but I think of it as a platform. not necessarily as an operating system. I mean, it's a virtual machine, Down VM runs on top of an OS, often Linux, right? So I think in the OS space, the most portable language across all the devices is C++. You can run it everywhere, right? And we have POSIX compliant C++, hard, it's hardened for many years, so it's really easy to use. So I think developer ecosystem, there's a lot of things you can do to improve and build your loyalty among your developers. The number one thing is engagement. You have to get out there, you got to talk to them, you got to see them, you got to touch them, shake hands, give them devices, and do that over and over and over and over again. And that's what we've been doing. And it's been working. Now we just need to get the sales side of the equation working.
I think we have time for more. I'll see Mario yelling at us for time. So let's get one more question, then we'll do audience Q&A. So we talked a lot about mobile. Of course, mobile is huge. I think we decided earlier, lots of folks here are mobile developers. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that wearables are going to become as big in some way, shape, or form. We could probably spend a whole discussion around the technology around wearables and what you can do there. But I want to ask you guys an interesting question for me is what non-technical obstacles do you see becoming a barrier to wearables becoming mainstream? Is it legal? Is there privacy? Is it data access? Is it things like, we have folks here wearing Google Glass, say a couple of folks around here, right? Are they recording this? Are they not? I don't know. How do you feel about, and how do you in the industry see this intersection of mobile, wearables, and technology becoming more and more intrusive by its nature? So what non-technical barriers do we have to that being adopted? That's kind of a leading question, but
I have one really quite stupid response to this, but I honestly think this is the major barrier: fashion. There's a lot of really cool devices out there, but I'll be brutally honest with you, I love my watch. Until I can get a watch, electronic watch that looks like this, I'm not going to wear a lock that's glued to my wrist. And as you can tell by looking at me, I'm not a particularly fashionable guy. If I think that, people who are genuinely fashionable, of which many of these people are in the audience,
You're much more fashionable than me.
but I honestly think that's going to be the major barrier. I think glass is awesome, it's so cool, but I do not want to look like a member of the board.
Yeah, I would have to.
Do I look like a number
Fashion, I think just social norms, I think, it's partially generational where, kids these days are always doing Facebook or Twitter and looking at their screens and
I don't mind.
driving and texting and stuff. And we live in a bubble here in Silicon Valley, so I think, we definitely, testing any new products, I think we want to go out to like middle America and make sure that we're not, drinking our own Kool-Aid where, everybody walking around at Google I/O with a Google Glass or in Mountain View where you see Teslas everywhere and Google Glass and Priuses and everybody's got their latest Samsung Galaxy S4 or your iPhone 5 or 5S coming down the road. So I think, fashion along with social norms, because I think, here in Silicon Valley, we're pretty much all early adopters, even if you don't think you are. You know way more what's going on than the rest of the US. So, we can say that, maybe the iWatch by Apple will take the world by storm, but still, I think there definitely are barriers, and I think part of it will be generational and have the youth adopt things more quickly.
I guess I'll be brief this time. I think, in addition to what the other panelists have said so far, I totally agree with fashion for sure and social norms. The thing I was going to say to add to that was privacy. You mentioned it. I think that's one of the biggest ones. We get over that hurdle. Just in terms of people even knowing what data that their wristwatch or their glass is, where it's going and who's using it. I think we get over that, and whether or not you're being recorded at that moment, that kind of thing. I think that's also generational because people seem to not care about that. But it's definitely always in the news. Even today, I think it was the license plate scanners was a big thing. I forget why, but there's a whole bunch of news about the privacy concerns over the police using license plate scanners to know where we are. So I think that's a big concern.
So I think fashion's a huge one. Social norms a huge one. Those tend to adapt as we adopt new technology. So it'll be interesting to see where those things go. I think that the concept of wearable technology is very, very new. And when we think about wearable technology right now, we tend to think of it in terms of these, big devices that we wear all the time. But wearable technologies will very likely be highly context specific. We may have certain devices that are fairly perennial, that are like secondary screens to a primary computing device like a smartphone. But you might also be wearing, between 5 and 10 different pieces of wearable technology at different points in your life or different points during your day-to-day. And I think that's actually indicates where the biggest barrier to adoption is, which is the understanding of these sorts of use cases, or the understanding of these sorts of contexts under which wearable technology is applicable. And as things like interoperability, standards, data availability, big data mining, all of these sorts of things continue to advance and are going to accelerate their advancement, then more and more of these contexts open up. And then as they open up, things like what is fashionable within this context can come into question and can then evolve what the physical form factor of that device might be like, how obtrusive it might be in terms of peaking or lighting up, stuff like that. So I think it's right now we're in a very, very early conceptual stage in terms of how we as a culture understand the adoption of wearable technology. We think of it in terms of these very, very big pieces. But in fact, it's probably going to bifurcate and spread out as these different types of contexts come up. And then we'll see true mass adoption. So.
Just to finish, so I think having spent an hour this morning on a call around privacy and legal, I want to say privacy and legal are the big issues. But I think back to your point, I think today we think of wearables as a watch or a monitor you wear in your pocket. I think over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the definition of wearables is going to change completely. We'll be wearing multiple wearables at any point in time. I think where it becomes scary is when you start combining multiple data points from multiple wearables and location and other mobile sensors or contextually relevant information. I think that's where things get a bit difficult from a privacy perspective. But I think, as you were saying, this is a generational thing. I think in 10, 15 years, people will think it's perfectly normal for you to have 3 wearables and for a bunch of third parties to be collecting data and combining it and mining it to enhance your life. So I think it's what a consumer's happy to put up with.
Great. So I know we have lots of folks that want to ask questions. Let's do this. We have a microphone up here. Why don't we pick out people who want to ask a question? Come up here. We'll give you a mic, and you can ask a question about the panel. Who wants to go first? I saw lots of hands. And all of a sudden everybody gets shy. Come on up, come on up. Come on up. I have a microphone for you.
AK. Turn the video off, AK.
Yeah. You can video and walk. Yeah. There you go.
What do you see as the next frontier of experience or technology or even marketplaces that international, transnational players like you guys, either in the open source space, the carrier, and hardware space, or the monetization space can really bring that isn't here in the mobile industry today? Because I feel like there's been some innovation on the hardware side, some market, the next iTunes guy side, where they're not happy with what we did there. But I think, I want to know, what do you guys see in the next space, either the integration of devices or whatever? Where do you guys see the next wave?
So I'll have a quick answer. So not to bang on about Firefox, but I think one of the premises of Firefox is breaking down some of those barriers. So you can put your app into the Firefox marketplace. You can choose whatever billing mechanism you want. You can put your app on the web and have it discovered via your own search mechanisms or through the web standards. I think for me, one of the most interesting things that I see happening is monetization through peer-to-peer relationships. So these control points or these central points of a store or a search box, I see those barriers breaking down and peer-to-peer monetization being a big aspect as openness grows in mobile.
I think two things. One is, without sounding predictable, I honestly think convergence is one aspect. I think we're going to want to, I don't want to have a laptop and an iPad and a phone all crammed into my bag when I'm traveling on a trip. I want my desktop to boot from my phone, and I want everything to share between those different pieces. There's multiple pieces that connect to that. There's the cloud, there's content, all the rest of it. I think that's one area in specific. But the second thing to me is I think it's going to be content, and it's going to be the availability of content from independent creators. The Creative Commons has had a profound impact on, I'm a musician, I've released an album under the Creative Commons, and it's really helped me with my music. We've seen this all over the world, but it's very much on the down low right now. I think as all of these platforms have a focus on content, we're going to be able to bypass the record industries, the movie companies, things like that, to be able to get independent content creators to get their content out to the world.
Since this is a panel on wearables and devices, I do think mobile health is a huge opportunity, just because, in a lot of advanced countries, and not even so advanced countries, population is aging. It's a huge, expense on GDP for a lot of countries. US, Japan, even China. I know China Mobile is very actively looking into a lot of mobile health solutions. So I think, and people in general, this whole self-quantified or quantified self movement, I think as the components get cheaper and it's easier to embed sensors as well as Bluetooth or Wi-Fi devices, tracking your weight, your heartbeat, your health is just going to be easier, it's going to be ambient, and people are just going to know more, and I think people do want to live healthier lives. So I do think wearables and mobile health specifically is a big space.
All right, I'm going to go way out there, because this is a big question that EK asked. So I'm going to say what I want to happen, not necessarily that I see it happening. What I want to see happen is a big revolution in energy. We're all always looking for that, plug in our devices, or carry around extra batteries. I carry 4 extra BlackBerry batteries usually when I'm going on some event, because I can sometimes not get to recharging it right away. And it's nice to have a fresh one to pop in. So that's the thing I want. So bringing it back to wearable, the thing I dreamed up someday, so if there's entrepreneurs out there that know how to do it, it's like, solar reflective cloth. So if you come up with a way to have a shirt, it just, where your clothes, it's of course fashionable. Not like big, put these panels on your back. I've seen people do that on their backpack and stuff. But something really cool. I think that would be big.
Like a Buck Rogers collar on.
Yeah, I passed a backpacker the other day actually up on vacation, and he had this big solar panel off the back of his back. And he's just hiking through I don't even think there was a signal anywhere. When he got found one, he was red.
We have a question right there. Come on.
Slide through.
We have wireless mics.
I was so happy to hear mobile health mentioned. First and foremost, I'm a nurse. Second of all, a developer. And I'm really looking for strategies. How are we going to bridge that gap between medical clinical engineering and wearable devices, or going so far as QNX in my steering wheel, so it's measuring my biometrics? Where are we going with that, and how are we going to move towards integrating those two? Because right now there's such a space, and I have patients all the time asking, how do I get this information to my doctor? How can they get this? My heart rate is going crazy with my Fitbit. What do I do?
That's a good question, right? Because all the information you collect now, whether it's from mobile phone or personal device, it's all siloed in its own space. So obviously that information is much more useful when it's cross-pollinated with other information. So you're the wearables, that's what you started asking. What do you think?
So I think sharing data with intimate groups, trusted groups, is a very obvious next step. So being able to allow your physician to have access to an account that you maintain with a wearables technology company is pretty straightforward. So like Basis does continuous heart rate monitoring. So things like monitoring your heart activity before you had a seizure, as somebody who's epilepsy, things like that. Very valuable information. To the broader point of your question, though, which is sort of like how does that gap start to bridge? So sensor technology is advancing fairly well. The optical sensor that's behind Basis that's used for determining heart rate
actually, spectroscopy can be used for identifying a whole host of things within bloodstream, for example. So understanding things from like carotenoid intake, which is like, how much basic heavy vegetables you're eating, and like hydration or things along those lines, which as medical research advances, you begin to understand are very important for preventative medicine, right? So preventative practices that are enabled by an onboard device that's basically there to objectively, continuously measure your body, where we as subjective, sleepy human beings fail at all the time, right? So that's I think that's very, very well within capability within our lifetimes for sure, like within a decade, something like that.
I think there's an interesting point you make here that data is much more useful when it's cross-pollinated. But we've seen efforts, and let's look at Google Health, for example, right? We create this vault in the sky while your medical information, and that crashed and burned pretty quickly because I think consumers didn't trust someone on Google to be that holder of that data. Ironically enough, because Google knows everything else about us, why not about our health?
Yeah, so
well, we don't know why they failed, but there was not a whole kick on it. But
so I guess I think we have to remember that things are moving in time, right? And when we watch this video in 10 years from now, and of course we all will, right? We look back, we'll hear our answers to these questions, and we'll think, gosh, that's right, they were still at that monitoring and communicating phase of the wearables. They weren't at the action-taking phase of the wearables, the implantables, or whatever it's going to be called, right? So, I mean, this is the process. So I think what's going to happen is, brilliant, entrepreneurs probably, much younger than myself are going to come up with ways to solve these problems. My son actually is a sophomore this year, and he's studying computer engineering. And I was all software. Software was everything, when I went to school. Now it's like software and hardware together. That's pretty cool. So they're going to get there. I think it's, it'll happen. When your watch tells you that your heart rate's too high, or that you got a heart attack, or whatever, your implantable is going to just take action. My rhythm's back to normal. Cool. And then might be, oh crap, and there's the withdrawal from my bank account paying for that service.
John, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think also, as consumers become more aware, so, the latest rumor of the iPhone 5S over the weekend was that it was going to have the fingerprint authentication, right? So people are starting to think, oh, what's next, and I've heard in terms of sensors becoming more advanced, there's this company based out of San Jose called NeuroSky, and they have, a processor that can measure brainwaves, EEG, and also EKG for heart rate, and they've demoed publicly that you can unlock your phone based on your unique heart rate, or your iPad. So just like as these things become more embedded, people will, I think, become aware and say, hey, why don't I have this? Why can't I do this? And then again, that feedback loop to the medical community will say, as well as governments, as well as doctors, they'll realize, hey, we can work together to have actionable cross-platform uniform data that can, with privacy, to be able to solve real medical problems. It is a matter of time.
Absolutely. So before Mario can join up here yelling at us, let's try squeezing one or two more questions.
Okay. Hi, my name is Suya. So I have a question for Larry from BlackBerry and the Ubuntu guy. I write a lot of Java and also JavaScript in my daily basis, especially for mobile apps, Android or mobile web-based. And I really enjoy both of the languages. Now I'm wondering, if I need to make another app on a different platform, I need to learn the whole new framework, the C++ Ubuntu for Ubuntu, and then BlackBerry's own framework, which is I think C++ based. And I've written a lot of C++ in the past, and I feel it's pretty ugly and unstable language. And I know Java is the leading language in the world. So why BlackBerry was Java based and then they moved to C++? What is the reasoning behind that? Although I like that you can still deploy an Android app, but it's not like Java is not a first-class language. So
that's a long story. I won't get into that.
I think, by the way, it's one of the,
Scalability is one word answer, but there's a much longer story behind it.
I think it's the third law of thermodynamics that every panel eventually evolves into a language war.
I said earlier, actually, I think that C++ is the most portable language. Someone, perhaps HTML5 could argue with that. I think we offer both, right? And not necessarily a C++ developer, grok's HTML5 and vice versa. So we just offer all different types of languages for each developer.
So, in answer to your question, much as I met Larry this evening, I think he's a stand-up guy. I think he's completely wrong about C++. Anyone who's programmed in C++ knows how error-prone programming in C++ is. It's a huge amount of work. It is extremely portable, there's no doubt about that, and I don't think most developers really care about that, per se. Because portability exists in many different languages. If you want to write an application for Ubuntu, you can write it using QML, which is a really neat, high-level declarative language. It feels like JavaScript.
We support that
which is part of the Q toolkit. Which is part of the Q toolkit, so you can write that with BlackBerry as well.
I think there's a very good discussion to be had around at what point do platforms become language agnostic at some point, and you can write bindings in all your favorite languages. And I think we're not there yet, but that's clearly where everything is headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, as well, is my theory here is every programming language is built for different brains. And certain people love to program in Java, some people love to program in C++. My recommendation is pick the toolkit that you like, pick the platform that you like, and just go with that. Ultimately, you're going to make the best decision that way.
That's great advice. Then one more question.
My name is David Perkins, and I just wanted to challenge you guys to try to respond to a growing population. And my mom is a member of that. She's 99 years old, and her biggest problem today is changing her clothes and not falling on the floor. And be able to have, a wearable sensor that can call the nurses when that event happens would make her feel more comfortable about her life. And she lives in a retirement home. It's a beautiful place, but the walls are really thick, and you have problems with communication. They don't have Wi-Fi there because of that. You're trying to get in there. But if you can do something about that, it's a growing population, and the world could be a better place.
I think it's an interesting point there. We have a rapidly aging population. People are living longer. And there's less technology that's addressed towards the latter half of that life, and it's all focused on the front half, because that's where the sexy and fun stuff is.
I'd say one thing that's connected to that as well is it's not just the elderly as well. I think it's the other side of the age spectrum is with babies as well. Like new parents, it's incredibly terrifying when you have a baby. And the reassurance that you can have around your baby, as well as your elderly grandparent or parent. To me, the key thing there is being able to have the technology, but then it being an open standard that you can communicate between different devices.
Well, I was like channel surfing the other day, and I saw a commercial, from First Alert, the people who made the turn, I've fallen and I can't get up. And so I think that technology isn't necessarily like Wi-Fi specific. I think it might even use 3G or 4G voice landline to call a remote center. So there's definitely technologies out there that don't require Wi-Fi or solutions out there. And certainly, I have an elderly mother, and I have a drop cam, installed. That does require Wi-Fi. So I do have these do-it-yourself solutions for home surveillance or parental monitoring that are great ways to be able to detect. I can. When my mother gets up in the morning, and she lives locally, so it's not that big a deal, but it has night vision and do alerts and stuff. So I think a lot of these do-it-yourself, as well as system operators like Comcast are selling Xfinity Home or whatever. There are lots of solutions, and there are going to be even more coming. So
this is definitely a huge growing market here. So I think we have one more question.
Yeah.
That's great. Go to the microphone.
Hi, I'm from Islam, and my question is, do you think a new model for app distribution, more like Spotify for app, would work? So people would pay a monthly subscription, and then they can download unlimited number of apps. Would that work for mobile phone and mobile device?
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I think it would. I actually submitted that idea at BlackBerry maybe 3 years ago. I don't know why we haven't done it yet, but I think it's brilliant. And the idea I was thinking was, you pay for a subscription for how many you can keep at a time on your device. So you can have kind of like a Netflix model, how many CDs or whatever, right? So I think it's a brilliant idea, and I just don't know why they haven't done it. Probably some financial reason.
I think it depends on the developer. There's a guy, a friend of mine actually, he's an open source developer. He actually tried to use this as a business model for writing his own apps, and it was a massive failure. And he's a good guy, he writes great code, but it was as if there was just a fundamental mistrust with his potential customers that he may get bored and go off and do something else. But I suspect for a different organization like Netflix or somebody else, for an startup like a Zynga, the model could likely work.
Yeah, and if you look at, there's some companies I'm doing on Steam currently, sort of that same model of releasing episodes of games. So it's an interesting concept though, that games become more, they're more commoditized on a consumer on a regular basis versus, like a new AAA title.
The advantage of that is that it spurs more trial.
Yeah.
People continuously try more and more apps. And then, as a hardware vendor, that's something we want, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think someone wanted to ask, and we have one more question.
Yeah, I was going to say, do it today. If you can find a commercial model that works, create your own marketplace, stick it in an open OS store, distribute it.
There you go. And one more question.
For Android.
I'm curious about with the wearables, if there's some move, what is the move away from making those reliant on a secondary PDA smartphone application to being able to communicate directly with the cloud, with some sort of application, so you completely bypass having to carry two devices when you're doing your exercising or whatever healthcare monitoring you're doing.
If I could sort of refocus that question a bit too, is cellular technology is getting smaller by the day. At what point does your mobile device become a secondary screen for your personal device or vice versa? At what point do they converge? At what point do you just not need them to be together at all?
Okay, so a lot of questions there, but let's see. So I don't know that you'll ever want to have any other computing device wholly divorced from another computing device. I think that we're going to find that when these things are interoperating, you're going to get richer context, richer user experiences. There will be, I think, specific use cases where it's fine to be operating on a specific type, a specific form factor interface. But a wearable device right now has only so many inputs and outputs, and certainly if it has a very, very specific function, that may be all that it needs. But in reality, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with the data that even, say, like a Fitbit produces, which doesn't have much of an interface, the Flex, let's say. But when you do go and look at data that's output over your smartphone, it can create really interesting experiences. So it's about the interoperability of those things. To your point, though, in terms of, is the space of cellular, what we call shrinking, or sort of the traditional smartphone space shrinking, yeah, I mean, arguably, it's doing, right now this thing is pretty powerful, and it does a lot of different things. It's got onboard accelerometers, it's looking at light, it has a lot of sensor-based stuff, and it does all these different things. So, yeah, certainly, wearable computing will basically take this and explode it. And very, very convenient use cases can sit on your watch, can sit discreetly somewhere else, and they're just going to talk to your garage door or your toaster or whatever it needs to do. So there will be limited context, but you'll probably still always come back to a richer interface at some level to be able to see how that one device talks to the other device, or what bearing it has on, for example, the health case with your loved ones, or all those sorts of things. They just computing is kind of all around us. Computing doesn't necessarily just always get stuck in one little device.
So like what you're saying, you see a future where there's two types of connectivity, one for generating data and tracking it, and one for consuming that data by a consumer. So the first one can be done by a small device with no screen, but the second one requires a richer UI and a richer cloud experience and so forth.
That might be a little artificial. Yeah, I could also see
see a way in which the return interface is actually maybe from a couple of different devices you move about your house or something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, every form factor lends itself, it has different affordances, you know. I can interact with this watch fairly well, but you know, if it's bigger, I can do more shit on it, you know, basically. So yeah.
Is that my free next product?
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I think we're at the first step of wearables. So I think even in a year's time, if we come back and sit here, I think we'll be blown away by what's happened in the course of 12 months. But I think you know, there are many more form factors to come when it comes to wearable devices. But I think there'll be a shift quite quickly away from form factor to the data. So how do you combine data from multiple devices, from multiple contexts, and make use of that data?
I was just going to say quickly, I agree with Ethan in the sense that I think that the visualization of the data, largely the device that you consume it on probably won't change that much. But I can imagine that the sensors will be the primary focus on the pieces that are connected into your body, on or into your body. In my mind, what's going to really propel the wearables world is if something similar to what happened with Arduino happens with sensors. So if people can buy Lego bricks of sensors that are really easy to connect together into interesting applications, so you don't have to start at the big start and all the rest of it to be able to get into that market. To me, that's what's going to really propelling that forward with also all the innovations happening in big data right now. Big data is becoming really accessible around the data that's mining the solution. Like, I think that's going to really propel it. And like you said, I think it's going to happen in the next 12 months.
Great. Great. Well, on that note, guys, thank you so much for sticking with us. You're a great audience. Please thank our panelists.
Thanks, guys. We're up for tonight. Feel free to hang out for the next half hour. We still have the bar's still open. And next month, September 9th, we are focusing the future of the smart home. So we have a really cool startup lineup. Startup next lineup. See you guys. Good night.
Thank you. How are you? You know what? As I was leaving the house today, I opened my computer and I saw you guys sent out and I was actually made me watch. Thank you. I should be like smarter on Twitter now instead of like, you know, posting random situations about dogs and big accounts. Clearly I'm not following my Twitter stream yet. Yeah. You've been busy. I'm enjoying the employment. Except for like, I've been spending a lot of time with my kids.